Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the third option. This is
Rick.
and I'm Judy, and we are here to talk about another character whose life was changed by a interaction, an encounter with Jesus,
Yeah, it was another salvation experience, if you will.
and,
Uh,
and meaning wholeness by
mm,
that. Yeah, a
right.
healing and wholeness.
This woman needed to be made whole,
Yeah,
and she was inwardly.
we're
Uh,
talking about the woman at the well, which can be found in John 4, verse 1.
there again, it's another one of those stories where the lowly are exalted again. Here again, of course, she's a Samaritan. Of course, she lives in shame because she just keeps getting rejected by men again and again and again. And we know that story of her. Essentially, it looks like she's avoiding people on purpose.
Right.
She's alone at that well at a time when other people are not going there.
So let's do a little back study on what happened prior to Jesus coming to the well. So if we look at chapter 3 in John, we see that John the Baptist, had been this popular baptizer and preacher, and now suddenly Jesus's disciples are baptizing more than John does. And somebody addresses him and he's like, "Look, he's who I've been waiting for. He's got to become greater and I've got to become less." And he's saying, he uses this beautiful symbology of the bridegroom in
Yeah,
describing Jesus.
yeah,
And he's calling him the bridegroom.
yeah.
And what does a bridegroom do? What did you do?
A bridegroom marries a bride, right?
Yeah, he wants a bride. And so this bridegroom is symbolically going towards a bride. And what happens at a well? Because he ends up at a well. What traditionally happens
In the Bible,
in the Bible at the well?
people found their bride a lot of times at the
Yeah.
well.
Abraham found his uh, servant found a wife for his son. Isaac
Mhm,
found a wife, or Jacob found his
mhm.
wife there. Even Moses found his
Found his
wife
wife at a
at a
well.
well.
Yeah.
So a lot of symbology here is happening as Jesus goes
Wow.
on this trip.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. So we'll start with John 4, verse 1. It says, "Therefore, when the Lord knew the Pharisees had heard this, that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee." But this is so cool. It says, "But he needed to go through
Why
Samaria."
did he say that? Why did he need
Well,
to
first of
go?
all, no good rabbi would go through
No good
Samaria.
Jew
No,
at all.
yeah, they would go around. They would go out of their way to go around.
That's one reason in the story of the Good Samaritan, the man was on the road to Jericho. That's the way to go around Samaria,
Yeah.
and even though it was a treacherous way to go, that was much better to them than having to
Interact
with Sumerians
yeah.
or Samaritans.
A Samaritan
Samaritans.
would be like a half breed, someone who has part of your culture, Jewish, but also had another part that was considered not
So
good.
they were considered unclean in that
Yes.
sense, and also there were some different beliefs. Even though they both worshipped the same
One
God, they
true
believed in
God.
that same
Mhm.
same God. Essentially, they had different they had beliefs that they disagreed on.
To me, it reminds me of a church split, when people are together worshiping the one true God, but there's this difference that they just cannot
Mhm.
stand. And so they separate, they live separate, they don't interact anymore, they just have their own club.
Yeah, and they just kind of this animosity had gone back hundreds of years,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and they're two people, two groups of people that just despise each other.
Yeah. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there, very symbolic. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour.
About noon.
Mm-hmm.
The when the sun is high and people don't go out and go to work and by getting water at the well.
It was their time to rest.
Yeah.
But the woman was there.
But there was a woman of Samaria. A woman was there, and Jesus approached her
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Give me a drink of water." And that broke a couple of things that a man like Jesus would not do. One, when I say a man like Jesus, he was a Jew,
And he was a rabbi.
and he was a rabbi, and he was a male,
Mm-hmm.
a man, and so men don't interact with women like that they're not married to, let alone a Samaritan woman who's unclean. And he asked for a drink of water. I mean,
Yeah.
to drink out of her vessel, which is considered unclean. Jews don't drink out of a vessel that a Samaritan would drink out of.
Very particular about where they drink, what order things are in. So a woman of Samaria came to the draw water, and Jesus said to her, so I just wanted to point out, it would be unusual for a woman to draw water at noon. She would have come early in the morning to get the water for the day. This was the water she would cook with. This is the water, that they would use throughout the day. And she's coming at noon, which is
When everybody else is gone.
which leads us to believe she's avoiding interacting with other people from the village because of her status. Even within the Samaritan community, they didn't like her.
Right. So you've got, in the eyes of normal Jews, you got them better than the Samaritans, but then among the Samaritans, they're better than this woman.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like the lowest of the
Of
low.
And Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink of me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." We've kind of
Excuse me.
talked about that. Jesus answered her and said, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water."
I think I need to ask Jesus for a drink of water right now.
Because you've been coughing. Do you need some water? So, what does he mean by "if you knew the gift of God"? Is he referring to himself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd be asking me because I've got something for you, is what he's saying, and that's what he needed to do. He needed to go there. He needed to give her some water.
Mm-hmm.
He's about to change things.
Yeah, he calls it living water, which is confusing to her, as it would be to me if I'm hearing it for the first time. Mm-hmm. But what does he mean by living water?
Well, he explains it to her, when she asks him the question in the next verse.
The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock?"
So he's standing there and he's got no bucket, no vessel, no nothing. And he says, "I've got water." He said, "You should be asking me for water."
But in her mind, thinking very flesh oriented, the fact that they had that physical well in that area meant life for a whole community, that they would have water. They would have access to water because of Jacob, because of their heritage, because that physical well.
And it's a special well.
Yeah.
Because of that, because of the heritage, because it goes back to Jacob, and it's very, very special. And she's drawing water from this special well.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, you should ask me. I got better water."
And he's like, "Well, how could you be better than what we have?"
Right.
Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I give him will become in him a fountain of water springing into everlasting life."
I love this. This is the experience of fullness that we're describing. When we talked about Zacchaeus in the last episode, that thing happened inside him, and it brought forth life, and it changed things.
Yes.
It changed how he felt, how he saw things. It changed what he thought about God, what he thought about himself, and it changed his actions. It changes everything. That's wholeness. And I love this description of a fountain that springs up into everlasting life, because that's what happened. This is why we're so crazy about God,
Yes.
because of that fountain right there.
Yeah.
It's because of that drinking that we actually do day by day by day, and we partake of love, and we partake of life and goodness, and it happens, and it really has become our very source of life in every kind of dimension that there is. And he says it's living water or running water, or springs up, so it doesn't run dry. It just keeps on coming.
It's so interesting. Like if you're this precious person, but you've kind of protected yourself, or you've been affected by life, like it's almost like all these things have hidden from you this real living being inside of you. And what happens is it starts to come out like a rose unfurling and becoming its full self.
Yeah, the life of God within you.
The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst nor come here to draw." I'm thinking she's like, I just don't want to be around this well, and I don't like interacting with these people. She's
still thinking of that. She's still thinking of this is our need right here. This water, I got to come here every day.
Yeah.
I'd like you to give it to me so I don't have to draw again. And then Jesus immediately starts the process of giving her the living water. And the way he starts it is by saying, okay, go call your husband and come here.
Now he knows her.
Like he did Zacchaeus.
Yeah.
Zacchaeus. He knew him, called him by name. He also knows who she is.
And he goes, the woman answered and said, I have no husband.
And Jesus said, you got that right. He said, because you've had 5 of them, and the one that you're now with is not your husband. And so you have spoken truly.
So he's basically bringing out the fact that he knows her.
That's one thing that she's getting out of this, is when she's hearing him describe exactly what her situation has been, she knows that he knows her.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I just feel like I need to give her credit for being honest. Like she didn't have to be honest with him. She could have been like, oh, he's on a trip, or I can't make up something. But she's just like, no, I don't have a husband.
Yeah. And so this does, maybe that says something to us too, that it's not that she was necessarily any kind of morally corrupt. She could have just been a decent, good person, but she was living with this shame of rejection for whatever reason, over and over and over. She was rejected 5 times.
Yes, because in that day, a woman could not initiate divorce. Only a man could.
It's not like she was divorcing all these men and just like, what's wrong with that woman?
I know, and I think traditionally, I always looked at her like, well, she's a loose woman. She goes
like
from man to
man.
man.
Or something, yeah.
But it puts all the blame on the woman, and we don't know for sure all those extenuating circumstances, but we do know that she likely was living with this guy because the previous husband had not released her from the divorce.
Had not given her a writ of divorce. So
yeah.
So because she's now with this other person, it's technically adultery. Right. Because there hasn't been a writ of divorcement that was granted to her by her husband.
And she has no power to fix that. Right. She's just had to kind of sink into, I'm a adulterous woman.
It's all in the hand of the
So would you think
husband.
She might not even be allowed in the synagogue? Oh, I don't know. We're Samaritans.
Well, she is guilty, according to the law, she is guilty of adultery under that. So she carries that label.
Yes.
But the point that we should make, though, is that Jesus knew her. He's obviously has shown that I know you.
Yeah.
But he also shows that I want to be here with you.
Yes. Yeah.
See how he does that?
Yeah. So the woman said to him, let me just fix this. Sorry. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive you are a prophet. So she's acknowledging that he has some sort of prophetic gift.
Yeah, she's like, okay, you nailed it.
Okay, since I know you're a prophet, she's asking him this religious question, like, our fathers worshiped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. So she's asking him a technical religious question where she wants to get the answer of who's right and who's wrong. And the fact that Jesus, who's a Jew, is in Samaria maybe gives her the idea of like, well, maybe we are right.
Maybe he's going to
like
agree with us.
he's on our side.
It's very typical of legalistic religion. We want to know who's got the rules right, who's keeping it right,
Yeah.
which one of us are right. I love his answer.
He says to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews.
So he says you won't worship on either mountain.
Either mountain or Jerusalem.
It won't be about that at all.
Well, he knows that Jerusalem is going to be
that's true.
Defeated.
So that's definitely true. So we got that. You got that issue, but also he explains to her what it's really all about. That it's not about that. Are you keeping the rule correctly, or are they doing it? Do you have the right interpretation, or do they?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not about the form of anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's about really a connection with the Father.
Yes. But the hour is coming, and now is, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth.
So it's not about these physical things that you're doing here. Mm-hmm. It's about the heart or the spirit.
Yeah, I think in the Jewish culture, they were really trying hard to create these rituals and ways of doing things that would keep them focused on God. But somehow it seems to get out of hand, where then the ritual starts to become more important than the actual human beings that we're encountering. And I think Jesus was breaking that tradition.
I have found that even in my Christianity over the years, from the beginning of it till now, that the more relational I am with the real person of God, the less ritualistic I am. That I had more ritual early on, mm-hmm. because ritual is sort of a placekeeper for knowing God. It's what we do in lieu of knowing God. That's our way of trying to connect in some way. And as we grow in the knowledge of God and we fall in love with him more, we come to know him more, we seem to leave more of the ritual behind. And because of what Jesus is just saying here, because it's really about spirit and truth. It's not about going to this place. It's about every day when I wake up, there it is right there. Yeah. It's not a certain day of the week. It's every day when I wake up, it's me and God, because it's relational there. And he says, that's what's coming. Yeah. And that's what's about to happen to this woman.
Yeah. Yeah. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. So she's alluding to this Messiah that even the Samaritans had heard about, and we're really waiting for him to come and tell them who's right. And she's acknowledging, like, when he comes, we'll figure this all out.
Yeah, but she says when he comes, he will tell us all things. Here's something I see in that statement too. Yeah, is that Jesus came as the expression of God. When no man had perceived God, the Son has declared him to us. He told us who the Father really is. He showed us who the Father is. You know, the statement that we like to make is that he didn't come to change the Father's mind about us. He came to change our mind about the Father. And that's what he did, because he did tell us all things. He did reveal God to us. And we're grateful for that.
Yes. And so Jesus responds to her assertion that the Christ is coming. He's going to settle all of this. And Jesus says to this woman and the Samaritan, he says to her, I who speak to you am he.
I am the Christ.
He reveals, first time publicly, like outside of his disciples, first time publicly reveals that he is the Messiah to a woman who is 5 times rejected by men and who is
A
in
Samaritan.
shame and is a Samaritan. So he he's finding his bride.
Yeah.
He's acknowledging this is who I've been looking for. You.
And so it was someone who was the lowest of the low,
Yes.
living in shame.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there again, we see him do that over and over again. Yeah, another point about that too is there again what he does when when you have that encounter, that interaction with Jesus, it changes everything. Because before she's questioning worship this place or that place, this way or that way, and it really didn't matter because if he would have said, "Yeah, it's the mountain that you've been doing it on. Keep doing it," she still would have been carried that shame and been miserable. If he said it's Jerusalem and she believed him and she starts doing that, she would have been as miserable as everybody else that goes to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have changed anything. It would have just,
Right.
it might have, it just wouldn't have changed anything. But what Jesus did changed something.
Yes.
It brought her to her authentic self.
I do, we get comments from people or, prayer requests from people either online or when we're speaking somewhere about how do I have this encounter? Like, I want to be close. I want to have this intimacy with God. How do I do this? And my answer to that is really, what would it, just ask the question, what would it be like if I sat with Jesus and in your imagination, imagine him treating you the way he's treated this
Yeah,
woman?
yeah,
Because
that's good.
whatever you've been through, whatever trauma you've experienced, whatever walls you've built up, whatever, self-protection mode you've been in, whatever sins, maybe secret sins that you've been dealing with, imagine Jesus knowing you and loving
Yeah,
you right like that.
yeah.
And that's, I mean, I think that's the simplest thing, is to consider what that encounter would look like. If he really is as good as we're
Yeah.
saying he is, if he's really as good as he was to this woman, or like we talked in our last podcast about Zacchaeus, who was like a morally bankrupt human being, if he was willing to have dinner, to share a drink with this woman, if he was willing, he's willing. And for us to receive is really just to come to a place of acknowledging that that too is for me.
It really blows legalistic religion out of the water when you consider what you just said, because he goes right past all of that. And it's not even a consideration.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's scandalous that it's still very much a consideration in a lot of religious circles and even in Christian circles. Um, but if you can, if someone can do what you just described, and said that he would sit with me and treat me like this, in spite of how I feel, in spite of what I've done or what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
and all of, but Jesus would still treat me this way. He
Mm-hmm.
would treat me with love, honor,
Mm-hmm.
respect, and all. Why? Because he takes the lowly and exalts them.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. He doesn't take the lowly and crush them and
Yes.
say, "Look what you've done. I've got, you deserve the worst of the worst." He never did that.
Yeah.
And we should see that very, very plainly. He
Mm-hmm.
never did that. He exalted the one that everyone thinks should have been just pruned, cut off, but
Right.
he lifted them up.
Yeah, I think the religion of that day, they felt that there was something wrong with people
Mhm.
who sinned. Like, they were either born that way, or it was their parents' fault, or
Mhm.
something was causing that. And I do want to say, it's never that Jesus shies away from the harm that these people have done to themselves and to others. It's not like he pretends like that's not there. He knows it's there, and he loves in that.
Yeah.
So there's a healing that happens when you're not hiding, like, oh, I hope he doesn't realize that I'm this way, but acknowledges it and loves you in
It's
that.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's the the prescription or the cure that's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that Jesus thinks sin is really great, and so that's why he
Yeah.
doesn't say anything about it.
Right.
It's not like you and I. It's not because like you and I are soft on sin and we don't think that it's harmful or it's a big deal. It is.
I know it's harmful. It's been
We've
harmful to
experienced it,
me.
and it
Yeah.
has hurt us horribly
Horribly.
and
Yeah.
hurt others around us. It's been very damaging. So it's horrible. But we needed a good prescription. And that good prescription that we see that Jesus gives, and we've
Mm-hmm.
experienced that he gives, is love, honor, mercy, compassion, all the things of his heart. Not crushing, not threatening, not,
Condemnation.
not guilt.
Yeah. So for so long, we relied on self hatred, self loathing, self condemnation, or onto others that we thought that would
Mm-hmm.
inspire. Remember the whole shame on you,
Mm-hmm.
shame.
Yeah.
We thought, okay, if they know how bad they are, they'll want to change. But I think a lot of us have come to this place where we realize like that is not working.
No, we
So
needed love.
yeah.
We needed to be able to come to our authentic self. We needed to be loved in our worst condition. And that's what Jesus does.
Yes.
And so we tell people, consider that.
Mm-hmm.
Consider that Jesus is today, just like he was in the Bible, with all of these people that
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about. And look with that kind of how he treated them. Look what it does to them. And this is how he treats you. This is how he treats
So
all
good.
of us.
Yeah, so good. All right, just to finish out chapter 4, this interchange. At this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with a woman. And yet no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking to her? They didn't ask any questions. The woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and said to the men, he said to the men, did you notice that? To the men, come see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? Then they went out of the city and came to him. I just want to point out that she was avoiding these people, which is why she was at the well at noon. After an encounter with Jesus, she's no longer avoiding. She's no longer being driven by shame. She runs back in towards the very people that rejected her and shamed her and despised her.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells them, you guys got to come see this man.
Come see a man who told me everything I've done.
Yes.
Could this be the Christ?
Mm-hmm.
Not only did he know everything about me, but he treated me really good.
Really good. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. And he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. Therefore, the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat?
What food was he talking about? In the next
Jesus
verse.
said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do not say there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest. Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white.
My food is to do the will of him who sent me. This was what brought joy to him, and his will was to seek and save that which was lost.
And he did it by love.
Mm-hmm. And that's what he does, and that's what we see in example after example. What we see, these people are the proverbial lost coin out of the 10.
Right.
The lost coin never loses its value because it's lost. It's still as valuable. In fact, because it's lost, you care about it more than the ones that you already have in your pocket. Same way with the sheep that's lost. Your attention goes to that. And that's what he's telling them. This is how the Father is. His attention is upon them. This whole thing about me coming is to go and get them. And his coming still does that today. The message of Jesus, the story of Jesus, the message of the gospel and the cross, it comes to get us. It tells people that are the lowest of the low, come on, this is for you. You have a place with me.
I love it.
And we come just as we are.
Well, let's close out here since I think we're running out of time. So
like 10 seconds.
Okay. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll be on next week for another.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Third Option.